Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Yoke Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yoke Janavalabha. There's no verse schedule today. Yoke Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yoke Yashodanandana Bhaja Janarandana
Nandana Vraja Janaranjana
Yashodanandana Bhaja Janarandana
Yashodana.
Closer. Just a little closer. So.
Yamuna Tira
Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira
Joy. Jai Nitalita Vishnu Mishtapad Mahamsa Parivad Vichadastata Sata Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Tegaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Rankaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaur Premanandi All glory to the Samadorati All glory to the Samadorati All glory to the Samadorati All glory to Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga and Srila Prabhupada. This one should go in the charger too. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Additional Pastimes, still in the chapter, Opening a Temple in Los Angeles. Govinda Dasi had been complaining to Aniruddha that Swamiji's apartment was too noisy and crowded, and that there were no private bathroom facilities for Swamiji. She kept insisting Aniruddha find a better place. Aniruddha, however, was getting only $200 a month from Dayananda. And with Prabhupada, plus so many visitors, there was a financial strain. Swamiji is very uncomfortable, Govinda Dasi nagged, but Aniruddha didn't know what to do. When Aniruddha asked Prabhupada if the place was all right, he said it was. Aniruddha explained that more devotees were eager to visit from San Francisco and would probably want to stay in the apartment. Personally, Prabhupada said, I have no suggestion myself. It is up to them, whatever they decide. This is an indication that Prabhupada was giving everyone an opportunity to recognize the situation for what it was, an inconvenience. But at the time, not many devotees were very self-aware. The complaint from many of my godbrothers who were in the original area of 26 2nd Avenue and Prabhupada's apartment. There was a brahmachari ashram which was in another devotee's apartment over on the Lancey Street. And so the devotees, it was crowded. So the devotees would walk from there, and walk to 26 2nd Avenue, and they would use Prabhupada's bathroom. And sometimes, of course, I mean, Prabhupada was already up and chatting, but whatever was there in that bathroom they would use, including Prabhupada's towel. So these are, of course, always the dangers that due to lack of training and this very exuberant enthusiasm not tempered by proper etiquette or training. So there were so many, but Prabhupada was very tolerant. From what I understood, that he had never complained, as we see here. I have no suggestion. It is up to them whenever they decide. Prabhupada had his translating to do, but he also wanted to see his disciples. For Aniruddha, however, the prospect of more devotees coming to visit was a cause of anxiety. Finally, he and Dayananda found a larger apartment for Swamiji. The new apartment was 4 rooms over a private garage in the rear of an apartment complex. Aniruddha painted, and some of the other devotees helped prepare the apartment as comfortably as possible for Prabhupada. Then they moved him in. The landlord, a small Japanese man, came by and seeing Prabhupada seated on the floor behind his trunk, he asked, "Where's your furniture?" He seemed suspicious. Prabhupada smiled, thanked him, and said it was all right. We can sit down anywhere, Prabhupada explained. We are mendicant. But after leaving, the landlord kept standing outside on the landing, peeking through the window. Tell him to go away, Prabhupada said to Aniruddha. Tell him to go away. At the temple during the evening program, Srila Prabhupada would sometimes ask one of his disciples to speak after the kirtan. Dayananda. One night, as I was driving Swamiji to the temple, he asked me to speak. I immediately thought I would rather not. Although in Swamiji's absence, his other disciples had given talks. I had never given even an informal talk. So I told Swamiji I preferred to hear him speak. But he said he preferred to hear me. So it was settled. So this is Srila Prabhupada's very subtle way of determining whether the devotees were hearing and understanding what he was saying. That if you can repeat it according to your realization. So there's another 2nd Avenue story. When Prabhupada left for the first time to go to San Francisco, at that time he had been in New York continuously for 1 year. So 66 to 67, after they had the temple. And so Prabhupada had given every single class. No one had ever spoken besides Srila Prabhupada. And so when the plans were made and it was inevitable Prabhupada was leaving, they asked Prabhupada, who will give class? So Prabhupada said, you will give class. You meaning everyone. Vishwanaga Vinodaya Ki. So Brahmananda Maharaj asked, Prabhupada, what will we speak on? They had no Bhagavatams, they had nothing, they had Prabhupada's Bhagavatams, which they'd already gone through. So they said, Prabhupada, what will we speak? Prabhupada said, you will speak according to your realization. So this was, again, same as here with Dayananda. You will speak according to your realization. So Satsvarup Maharaj commented that those were the shortest classes in ISKCON history. Nobody could speak more than 5 or 10 minutes. Because they were very strict to that. What did they understand? Well, even us, imagine coming, we're not these bodies. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We are all his eternal servants. The shortest classes in ISKCON history. Satsuma Maharaj had a way of putting things in context to make it obvious contemporaneously what the situation was like at that time. A bunch of young men listening to Prabhupada. And after 1 year, shortest classes in this kind of history. At the temple we had kirtan as usual, and then I began to speak. I was speaking on the validity of God, trying to prove that God's existence was logical and scientifically reasonable. Such a talk should have been given with reference to the Vedic literature, but my fund of knowledge was not embellished by verses from the scripture, nor was it even adequately based on basic Krishna conscious philosophy. I was aware that my talk wasn't adequate, a fact that Prabhupada himself had brought home in the sweetest possible way. When at one point I made a mistake and said the wrong thing altogether, Prabhupada matter-of-factly interrupted, explaining the point I had misstated. He then motioned me to go on. I continued without any loss of face. I was being corrected in public, but without the embarrassment that a chastisement might cause. Swamiji's correction was always based on love and sincerity, in relation to the goal rather than to the ego. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. To the goal rather than to the ego. So I looked at the class schedule today, and it just says, festival class, and no verse. So there's no verse, what do we chant? So I think the other devotees previously had been chanting some bhajans. But like Dayananda, I'll pass on that. And we'll read something about the glories of Lord Balarama, since we will be celebrating that auspicious event with a full day fast tomorrow, up till sunset. Typically in India, when there's a full day fast and it's not near Jala, you fast from water up till noon. So if anyone is inclined, they can fast till noon from water. And then observe the fast up until the evening, as usual. So we're very fortunate. Just imagine if we had this facility when Srila Prabhupada left, then they could speak on so many different things, but they had to rely on their whatever knowledge they had acquired in that short span of time. So we have this very nice description from Srila Prabhupada's summary study of the 10th canto, Krishna book. And we have very brief sections that go over some of Lord Balarama's prominent pastimes. So first they have, who is Lord Balarama? We know who Lord Balarama is in Krishna's pastimes, but in the beginning, we didn't know that Lord Balarama was expansion, Krishna, Sankarsana, he was the primary first expansion. We just knew the stories that we'd read in Krishna book. And some of them had some hint about the nature of Lord Balarama's supreme position, how he is not different from Krishna except for his complexion. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is the fountainhead of all incarnations. Lord Balarama is his second body. They are both one and the same identity. They differ only in form. Balarama is the first bodily expansion of Krishna, and he assists in Lord Krishna's transcendental pastimes. He is the source of the entire spiritual world, and is the Adi Guru, the original spiritual master. He assumes 5 other forms to serve Lord Krishna. He himself helps in the pastimes of Lord Krishna, and he does the work of creation in 4 other forms called the Chatur Vyuha, the 4-armed forms known as Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. He executes the orders of Lord Krishna in the work of creation, and in the form of Lord Shesha, he serves Sri Krishna in various ways. In all the forms he tastes the transcendental bliss of serving Krishna. No one can approach Krishna without first getting the mercy of Balarama. Also interesting how Srila Prabhupada in the beginning gave very prominent names to his first disciples. So we see that we have Pradyumna and Aniruddha here, that in the beginning, it's almost as if there was a special benediction being given to those who came first. You know, all directly from the Lord's pastimes, Garga Muni, family priest. And so in this way, we can somewhat see this historical situation with a very, by the grace of Satguru Maharaj and the Lilamrita, something very relatable, very personal. And we had a nice meeting last night of all the Bhaktivedanta Youth Service, Gita Life crowd. And they were asking many questions, of course, about Prabhupada. How did you meet Prabhupada? This, that. And it's, of course, it's interesting how we all met Srila Prabhupada. What was the arrangement? How did it come about? We see these things now from a different perspective, not as something coincidental, but as the culmination of a journey through millions of births, who knows how many births. Brahmanda Brahmate Pona Bhagavanji, Guru Krishna Kripai Bhai Bhakti. Millions of births. Such a rare encounter. Prabhupada described at one time that if you imagine a vast ocean, Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, whatever, and in that vast ocean there's a piece of driftwood. Anybody know what driftwood is? Wood that has become from some, obviously, place, but now it has been in the ocean for who knows how long, and it requires a certain property. But it's floating out thousands of miles from land. Right? And in that piece of driftwood, there is a knothole. Anyone who's a carpenter knows what a knothole is. You try to avoid them, because they're not suitable for many purposes. They're a defect, not a defect for the tree, but it's a defect for the carpenter, because you have to work around it. But then that knothole, at a certain point, pops out. And what's left then is just a hole. Right? So the knothole indicates that knot, and then the hole is in the absence once it's fallen out. So in this vast Pacific Ocean, this piece of driftwood is there, and Prabhupada said in that same ocean, there is a turtle. And then at some point, that turtle rises to the surface, as they do, after swimming for thousands of miles sometimes. And he pokes his head through that hole in that piece of driftwood. And a seemingly very coincidental, incongruous meeting. 1 in a million, 1 in a billion chance for that to happen. He said that is the rare opportunity of the living entity coming in contact with the spiritual, a bona fide spiritual master. And I don't know if this is an example that Prabhupada is giving us from his own realization, or if he heard it someplace from another story. But in any case, hearing these, we can somewhat appreciate what a benediction this is. And so, of course, the Adi Guru is Lord Balarama. And so having this connection to Lord Balarama through the bona fide spiritual master is the key to approaching the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. So this relationship can never be minimized, and it must always be protected. So one has to protect his relationship with the spiritual master very carefully. Sometimes one is attracted by other aspects. If someone says, like in Vrindavan, some devotees are going outside in the summertime, there is what's called, they have these Ras Lila, same around the time as July. And these actors, they portray, and it's very interesting from a dramatic perspective, from a cultural or social perspective, but it is all, how can you say it, mispresented, misinterpreted and mispresented. And so when he says, why are they going out? Because the danger of going out then is to hear from something that will put a misconception in the neophyte devotee's mind. First one has to understand that he's a neophyte. Sometimes you think, oh, now I'm in the movement for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I'm an advanced devotee. And I can go hear anything without problem. But we saw what happened. Many devotees became bewildered by hearing, because when they have these Ras Leelas, people are speaking also. And they're speaking all these basically sahaja points of the philosophy. Because that's what they think people want to hear. Krishna's dancing with the gopis. Lord Balarama's dancing with the gopis. Everybody's dancing with the gopis. And you can too. So it's very, very insidious, very subtle. And then what happens? The Prabhupada said, if they go, then they should not come back. Very strong. If they go, they should not come back. And some didn't come back. That was the point. That they were hearing from others and they lost their connection to Srila Prabhupada. They did not protect the relationship. It's like if a man or a woman who's married goes out and thinks, let me go and have some fun with my friends. They've invited me to go, what do they call it? Clubbing? They've invited me to go out. But then what happens? Then, unprotected from their natural shelter, the husband or the wife, they become victimized by Maya. The Grihastha ashram is compared to a fortress. And this is all in relationship to protecting and preserving this relationship with Lord Balarama, the Adi Guru, Lord Nityananda, his direct incarnation, not different. So we have to have some appreciation, not to take it so casually, that this is just some official function, that I've taken initiation and now I am a disciple and there's no need for me to, it's just like in the household. So now you're married and you don't do anything, you don't help your partner, you just expect to have some reciprocation based on the mundane conception of these relationships. But this is not cultivating a relationship. This is not protecting, preserving, enhancing. There's nothing. So one becomes simply an official. And so we see that in India, there are many like that. Initiation is just a rite of passage. At a certain point you get a Brahmin's thread. At a certain point you got a name. And then you forget about everything. The guru goes this way, you go this way. You never meet again. This jati guru, hereditary guru. That term is jati. Sometimes cool also, but same. So we don't have that luxury of thinking that, no, I don't have to do anything. I've got my initiation. I've got my certificate, my Bhakti Shastri, my ISKCON disciple course. And we see many people still to this day are like that. They hold up these credentials as if these are the all in all, not the service to the Guru, not the service in the service of the Guru to the deity, to the mission. And so one has to be very careful. Who is the Guru? And so he is the representative of Lord Nityananda. And he should be treated as such. That conception should never be far from one's mind. And this person, he's representing the Adi Guru. So it's described here, going on. Whenever Krishna appears in the material world, he is accompanied by his associates and paraphernalia. 5,000 years ago, when Krishna descended into the material world, he was first preceded by Baladev only. After Baladev only after Baladev gives his mercy did Krishna descend. Such is the intimate relationship between Krishna and Baladev. Lord Balarama had to check out the scene, make sure everything was arranged properly. Of course, he is the arranger. All the paraphernalia for the pastimes, everything is coming from Lord Baladev. And then when the stage is set, then Krishna enters. When Baladev appeared as the seventh child in the womb of Devaki, she could understand that this was a divine child, and this made her all the more concerned about his safety. Even Kamsa could sense his potency, and he became fearful, thinking he may have been tricked by the prophecy that it would be slain only by the eighth child of Devaki. At this time, Krishna instructed Yogamaya, his internal potency, to transfer the unborn child from the womb of Devaki to that of Rohini, one of the other wives of Vasudeva, who was hiding from Kamsa in the house of Nanda Maharaj in Gokul. In this way, Balarama was born in Gokul under the protection of Nanda Maharaj. Gargamuni, the venerable Kul Guru, another name for the family priest, Kul Guru, of the Yadav dynasty, revealed to Rohini that the child she was carrying was indeed that of her husband Vasudeva. Must have come as quite a shock. At the time of the name-giving ceremony, he named the child Rama, one who gives all pleasures. Referring to the immense strength of the child, Gargamuni predicted that he will also be known as Balarama, Bala meaning strength. Since he was forcibly attracted from the womb of Devaki to that of Rohini, he would also be called Sankarshan. As the son of Rohini, he was also known as Rohini Nanda. As the elder brother of Krishna, he was also called Dauji. Has anyone seen Dauji in Gokul? 1, 2, 3. So 4 or 5. Okay, very good. So Dauji is a very special deity, installed by Lord Krishna's great-grandson, Vajranath. So there are several deities installed by Vajranath, and Dauji is maybe the most famous in that sense. And as new devotees, when we went there, we were cautioned by our older grandmothers that you cannot take Dauji's prasad. You know why? Those who have visited know why. Because Dauji, Lord Balarama is fond of intoxication. And so they make him a very special drink, similar to Varuni, but except it is the pulverized buds of the very potent sativa, cannabis sativa. And it's blended up and it's made into this, like a lassi. And so the locals in Braj call it bhang. So we were told, no. So because we were all ready to take the prasad. And they said, no, you cannot take it. I said, okay. Instead, we just got some Charanamrita sprinkled on our heads. So one has to be a little cautious. Cannot assume that every aspect of the tradition is suitable for us. And that is one of them. Dauji Maharaj ki jai. The form of Lord Balarama. Powerful Lord Balarama is 16 years old, full of the luster of youth, and has a fair complexion, the color of crystal. He wears blue garments and a garland of forest flowers. His handsome hair is tied in a graceful topknot. Splendid earrings adorn his ears, and his neck is splendidly decorated with garlands of flowers and strings of jewels. Splendid armlets and bracelets ornament Daoji's graceful and very strong arms, and his feet are decorated with splendid jeweled anklets. Lord Balaram's beauty is enhanced by the earrings touching his cheeks. His face is decorated with tilak made from musk, and his broad chest is ornamented with a garland of gunja. Gunja mala is like a berry, a seed, is found in Braj. And Giriraj wears such a necklace, typically. Gunja mala. Balaram's voice is very grave, and his arms are very long, touching his thighs. The splendor of Lord Balaram's transcendental form eclipses many millions of glistening rising moons, and the slightest sense of his boundless strength is sufficient to destroy many armies of demons. Although he knows the supernatural power of his younger brother Krishna, still out of love for him, he never leaves Krishna alone in the forest even for a moment. Balarama is Sri Krishna's dearest friend and is a great reservoir of the nectar and mellows of many kinds of transcendental pastimes. Well, there's a painting. Everyone has seen a copy. If you go to Srila Prabhupada's room in Vrindavan, just opposite Prabhupada's desk where he would sit, translate, greet devotees, is a very large painting that's in the Krishna book of Krishna and Balaram entering into the forest of Vrindavan. That's the title of the painting. And you see, of course, and our temple is called Krishna Balaram Mandir. So that, and our deities are very unique. There is no, those are the only Krishna Balaram deities for many, many years. You know, many other temples eventually. And Prabhupada actually said, when asked what temple, what deities should we put on farms, he said Krishna Balaram. So in Alachua, we have Krishna Balaram, along with Radha Sham. So in the farms, all farms, Prabhupada said Krishna Balaram deities. But the, anyway, very interesting how these, this painting, just opposite Srila Prabhupada, occupies such a prominent position in that room, eclipsing all other paintings in various pastimes. And when asked, Srila Prabhupada said that this painting is the perfection of the eyes. This painting is the perfection. Seeing Krishna and Balaram entering into the forest of Vrindavan is the perfection of the eyes. And he could have said so many things. Could have said, you know, picture of the Ras Leela, or the picture of this, or the picture of that. But this is the painting that he specifically said is the perfection of the eyes. Of course, many devotees always like to meditate on Srila Prabhupada's eternal position. We know that Nikunja Yuno Rati Keli Siddhaya. But at the same time, we see that Prabhupada's mood, in many ways, is that of a cowherd. But this is just from a neophyte perspective. We don't know. But he himself didn't dissuade our, how can you say, meditating in this way on his position. And it was only reinforced when he would make statements like this, and naming the temple Krishna Balarama, and then identifying his painting as the perfection of the eyes. Specific pastimes of Lord Balaram. Balaram slays Dhenukasura. Dhenukasura was a powerful demon who had assumed the form of an ass. With his demon friends, he was occupying Talavan, one of the 12 forests of Vrindavan. Out of fear of these demons, no one could approach Talavan and enjoy the numerous flowers and fruits in the forest. Balarama, induced by his cowherd friends, entered the forest desiring to kill the demons. He began shaking the fruit trees, making a big noise. Dhanuka, furious at the intrusion, attacked Balarama with his rear legs. But Balaram easily picked him up by his legs and whirled him around until he died. As the other demon friends of Dhanuka rushed to attack, Krishna and Balaram picked them up and threw them on the trees, killing them. Soon the forest was free of all demons, and it appeared that the bent trees were being directed by Balaram to pay obeisances to Krishna. So this another very attractive feature, you know, the eternal Leela stands of Krishna distributed throughout the Dham, is that wherever you go in Vrindavan, one has ample memories. It's impossible not to see. Even in just like in Krishna book, Prabhupada said that when one enters the precincts of Vrindavan, he notices the change. It's perceptible. It doesn't matter who you are, what level of realization you're at, whether you're a devotee or a non-devotee. Anyone who's a little perceptive when he enters that Chaurasi Braj, the Chaurasi Krosh, those precincts, he notices the difference. He feels it. And so this is another indication. You know, some people always want to know, how do you know that this is Krishna is the Supreme Person? Why not this? Why not that? But when a devotee goes, he actually gets the tangible exchange of these mellows which is there and which will always be there, because the nature of Vrindavan Dham is that it is eternal and it is existing always, and it exists to those who have the eyes to see. You know, but we should at least respect it in that way. And so that when we go to the Dham, Prabhupada told us we should never be looking at the Dham like some place to live. My godbrother Hansarupa, he was very fond. We were working together there for many years. And he was not a man of many words. One wants to hear his classes on Harinam Chintamani, and you go to the Vrindavan Institute of Higher Education website, you can still listen to his classes, very nicely explained, which is these scriptures left to us, unless they're elucidated by someone who is in the line, there's a danger of misinterpretation. So one always has to be a little careful. Many Mayavadis or pseudo-Vaishnavas translate these simply for some recognition. So one has to be a little attentive. So anyway, he had this saying, and he would occasionally surprise me with it in order to reorient me. Because we all, after living in Vrindavan, nobody wanted to leave. We wanted to stay there forever. Our prayer was, please allow me to stay and serve you. But it's a fairly selfish thing. Who are we to get such concessions from the Supreme Lord that we should get some special treatment, that we can live here and others can? No. So we were praying, and Karma would just kind of like interrupt this fantasy and say, Vrindavan is not a place for living. Vrindavan is a place for dying. And so this was, like I said, many people are there simply going to try to make some living and try to stay there just because I want to associate with the Dhamma. And then they end up doing so many weird things, like real estate. Very bad. One should never do business in the Dhamma. Doesn't matter Mayapur or Vrindavan Dhamma. One should never do business in the Dhamma. But yet, many devotees fall into that trap. And without realizing it, because nobody knows what the future holds. Even Shakespeare was very clear in that. Trust no future, however pleasant. Somebody paints a picture, very rosy picture, but it is not reality. So one has to be very suspect. He has to use this realization that Prabhupada is giving us according to our ability to implement. You know, if you cannot take what realization you have and implement it, what do they say? Use it or lose it. Use it or lose it. And that's what happens. And Krishna is giving you some realization. So Sankirtan is the ideal situation. Because there you're forced to convince yourself in the humble attempt to convince others. You have to remember the verses like Dayananda was saying, that there wasn't an emphasis on studying. We didn't even have, in many cases, many books to study the Sanskrit shlokas. But Bhagavad Gita was always there. And so that was why primarily we memorized these initially, because that was what was available. It's not that every devotee could have access unless you had an iPad. You could, even though there were several volumes up to third canto published at that time, nobody had individual volumes. We were brahmacharis. The only two books we had at that time, maybe three if we were lucky, was Bhagavad Gita, Nectar Devotion, and sometimes Sri Ishopanishad. Because we chanted those regularly, we read those regularly. But those are the only books we possessed. So if you're going to study, that's your study. Just think of how nice it is now. Anything you want to learn, anything you want to study, it's all here. Right? Dr. Phil was telling me about the Shloka Samurais. You have that program, Shloka Samurai. Yes, you can. We used to have to use flip cards, handwritten, strung together with just a ring from a ring binder. You flip them up. What do they call them? There's a term for that, but I forget. Anyway. And so that was how. Writing, my dear mother, instructed me at an early age. If you want to remember something, write it down. Because the writing is forms an impression. And so that was something we hand wrote all of the shlokas on the index cards that we were attempting to memorize. It was very effective. Now we're just reading all that. And practically no one can have handwriting that they can read. This is another unfortunate aspect of Kali Yuga. You hear it all the time. People say, I can't read my own handwriting. Balarama kills Palambasura. This is one of my favorites. Once when Krishna and Balarama were playing with the cowherd boys, a demon named Palamba entered their midst, disguised as a cowherd boy. Understanding the invincible potency of Krishna, he instead decided to abduct Balarama. That was a mistake. At the end of the game, as a losing party, he was supposed to carry Balarama on his shoulders. Carrying the Lord on his shoulders, he ran swiftly. But Balarama, realizing the true identity of the demon, began to make himself heavier and heavier. Unable to bear the weight, the demon assumed his original form, which was like a huge, dark, effulgent cloud, decorated with golden ornaments. Balaram then brought his fist down on the head of the demon, splitting it into two and causing him to give up his life. Of course, in the Krishna book, this is much more graphic. How the demon immediately began vomiting blood again and again. I saw that. But this, that's okay for this. But this, so Balarama became heavy. So what is another? Prabhupada gave the definition of guru. He said guru means heavy. So just like what heavy with knowledge. We can appreciate that Srila Prabhupada was the heaviest, right? In the jargon of the 60s, when something was profound, the hippies had a term. They would say, "That's heavy, man. That's heavy." I don't know where it came from, but it meant that it took a lot of contemplation to understand what it was that was being discussed. And there were all types of discussions going on in the haze of various herbs and psychedelics. So there was always some. And so you could just imagine a bunch of these people. As a side note, the Grateful Dead were very, one of the early supporters of Krishna consciousness in San Francisco, in Haight-Ashbury. Arranged by Mukunda and the other devotees. They had that big program at the Avalon Ballroom. The Avalon was also affectionately known by the locals and by others who were in that hippie crowd as the family dog, for various reasons. Anyway, Avalon Ballroom, and the headliners were the Grateful Dead, Janis Joplin, Big Brother, all the top names from the West Coast at that time. And the payment, the Grateful Dead also gave the temple the first commercial stove, because they liked prasadam. And so whenever they were in town, the devotees would cook prasadam and bring it to wherever venue they were. And so we continued the tradition for years until the band stopped touring. And in New York here, when we were, when I was still here, and we used to do Sankirtan and all whenever they would play, whatever venue it was. And we would make them big trays of luglus, because luglus were our famous prasadam. And we would put them on the big trays that we have downstairs and pile them up. They had a very attractive pyramid shape. And we would go to the side entrance of whatever venue. The very last time we ever did this was probably maybe 1980. And it was at the newly built, they have the stadium, what is it called? New Jersey, Meadowlands? Is that Meadowlands? And so we took this tray, myself, Toshan, and Krishna, and he had, of course, done it. He joined in San Francisco in 1967. So he'd been doing this for years. Same thing, he knew them. So he'd walk in, he'd have this big tray, he'd hold it up, and he'd just approach the door, and there's guards at the door, of course. They don't want anybody sneaking in through this entrance. This is where all the performers go in. And he'd say, "Food for the dead. Food for the dead." And like they have that old fairy tale, "Open Sesame." So he was saying, "Food for the dead," and all of a sudden these doors would open. We'd walk right in. Walk right into the area, the green room, whatever they call it. And there, again, under another haze of herbal smoke, all these band members, their groupies and their associates are sitting there. And as soon as they would see it, they'd say, "Hare Krishna!" We'd set the platter right down in the middle of it, because what happens when you're smoking all these different things? You get the munchies. And so they were waiting for these, and they knew that we would come. And they would devour these. And then we would go back, not out, we would just go and take up our posts, because we had book bags as well. And then we would go inside the stadium during the concerts, and we would blitz the stadium, up and down the aisle, distributing Bhakti guidance and incense, like that. So this was, and I'm sure everyone's looking forward. Those venues were the most lucrative venues back in the day, captive audiences. Everybody wanted incense, and we would always tell them that, "Hey, this is the book the band is reading. You should probably look at it and see." Everybody took the book. Everybody took Krishna book or Bhagavad Gita, whatever we were distributing. Because they wanted to read what the band was reading. So very interesting times. prasadam, food for the dead. Balaram glorified by Krishna. As the elder brother of Krishna, Balaram was the object of his love and respect. Once when walking in the forest of Vrindavan, Krishna observed the tree bending down as if paying obeisances. He glorified the lotus feet of Balaram as being the object of devotion even for the demigods. He said that the trees, which were impersonalists in previous lifetimes, witnessing the personal form of Balaram, were now praying for his devotion. At other times when Balaram would get tired by playing, he would lie down on the lap of one of the cowherd boys, and Krishna would personally massage his feet, fan him, and give him service. Such was the sweet reciprocation of love between Krishna and Balaram. Jamuna Devi chastised. Once Lord Balaram, who was at the time living in Dwarka, came back to stay in Vrindavan for 2 months. At this time he enjoyed pastimes with his gopi friends, who were different from the gopis of Krishna. Enjoying such pastimes in the bank of Jamuna at Ramaghat, the Lord summoned Jamuna so that he could sport in the waters. When Jamuna Devi did not respond, Lord Balaram took up his favorite weapon, his plow, and began to drag Jamuna in 100 streams. No, everyone knows his pastimes? He bifurcated the Jamuna with his plow because she didn't come before him. When Jamuna Devi did not respond, Lord Balaram took up his favorite weapon and began to drag Jamuna. Understanding the position of Balaram, Jamuna Devi personally appeared and offered her obeisances to the Lord with many prayers in his glorification. Thus appeased, the Lord entered and bathed in the waters of the river. Balaram marries Revati. So Dauji in Braj is with Revati. Yeah, so in Satyuga, there was a king named Raivata, whose daughter Revati was excellent in all respects. Unable to find a match suitable for her, the king took her to the court of Brahma for his advice. After waiting for some time, when the king met with Brahma, he was shocked to learn that in the short time he spent in Brahmalok, millions of years had already passed on earth. And at the time, Dwapara Yuga was concluding. However, Lord Balaram informed King Raivata that present at this time was Lord Balaram, who was more than qualified to be the husband of Revati. King Raivata returned and approached Balaram to accept Revati as his wife. However, Revati belonged to an earlier yuga when people were much larger physically. So Lord Balaram placed his plow on her head until she shrunk to an appropriate size, and then accepted her as his wife. So this is another instance of relativity being explained in the Bhagavatam, which we know in written form is at least 5,200 years. So how could they understand this point of relativity? That in the higher planetary systems, that time is different than earthly time. Right? You know, now, of course, people have measured these things using faulty instruments, but still they conclude that days and nights and years are relative to the orbit of the planets around the sun, or vice versa. So does anyone know, as an example, how long is a day on, say, Jupiter? 36 Earth years. That's one day on Jupiter. 36 Earth years. But Lord Brahma's one moment, does anyone know what the calculation of a moment is? In the Srimad Bhagavatam, in that pastime, Lord Brahma steals the cows and cowherd. A moment, lava matra, sadhu sangha, one moment, 1/11th of a second. A moment is 1/11th of a second. That 1/11th of a second that Lord Brahma stepped away after putting the cowherd boys in the cave, when he came back, 1 year had passed. So Lord Brahma's 1/11th of a second is 1 year of our time. Who can calculate this passage of time? So this is very interesting. Someone doubts the veracity of the Bhagavatam, but they have no clue that everything is explained here. The entire cosmic manifestation. But they don't have the eyes or the opportunity to surrender to a bona fide spiritual master who will only Jnana Taman Dasha, who will open their darkened eyes by the mercy of Lord Balarama. We're very fortunate in this respect. Of course, there's many stories, and I'm sure there'll be more opportunity. Others will explain like that. But at least you got to hear how Lord Balarama was the Adi Guru, and his position in that respect is most worshipable. So those in our situation, especially in our line, where we have this information that others may not, because a lot of, if you see, most people, they're only concentrating on the 10th canto. You know, they couldn't be bothered with the 5th canto, what to speak of the 1st canto. They think that we're, occasionally, it may be logical in one sense, that one wants to jump over the various lower levels of realization. But in such matters of reality, one has to approach first the lotus feet of the Lord, and then proceed gradually up to the lotus face. And if one reads the first 9 cantos, Srila Prabhupada said, he will be fully self-realized. First 9 cantos, fully self-realized. And then he can understand the summum bonum, the absolute truth. Otherwise, there's a danger of misunderstanding and again falling down, being victimized by one's mind or by others' minds, right? Adiyami, Adibodik, and Adidagi. It doesn't mean just my mind. It means I may have some bad counsel. You know, you stay with a bunch of friends and they fill your head with nonsense. Say, yeah, but we can do like this, do like that. You don't have to. Let's go see the Rasiya. Let's go to the Rasa Leela. These are not friends. Let's go listen to this person who's not in our line, but he speaks very nicely to you. You should hear it. He tells all about these intimate pastimes. If I had a rupee for every time I'd heard that, I'd be a crorepati. Because she lived there for many years, and people want to, they think that spiritual life is something you can experiment with. But no, it's fixed. You may not want it to be like that. You may complain, oh, this is rigid, or this is fanatical. How many times we've heard that also? But that's because they're taking everything out of context. You know, the science of self-realization is not for the faint of heart. You know, there's many adjustments required as the various obstacles are encountered. But the ease with which one overcomes them is only based on his sincerity. Because if he is sincere, then Krishna, Ananyas Chintayanto Mam. Krishna will give you everything. He will carry what you lack, preserve what you have. So nothing external needed. Right? Any questions or comments? I mean, we didn't have a verse, but still we spoke about the glories of Lord Balarama, the Adi Guru. Everyone can have some meditation for today, and how these two personalities are the perfection of the eyes. And of course, the gopis themselves, and every description are giving the same conclusion. And who are those gopis? You know, the great sages from the forest of Dandakaranya in the pastimes of Lord Ramchandra. It was like the trees were impersonalists, but the gopis are great sages. It's very interesting how we can appreciate the evolution of the jiva and his aspirations from the neophyte understanding of the philosophy up to the highest level. Very sophisticated. Even to discuss it, one has to be very sober. Any questions? Any questions? I guess everybody's hungry. Oh, Dr. Phil's not so hungry.
Yeah, so you said the trees were impersonalists in their past life, but I thought the impersonalist can't be a part of Krishna's pastime.
Well, Krishna has many areas of pastimes. And we can't speculate, but these pastimes, Boma Lila, happening on a planet in the universe when Krishna appears. And there, of course, it's Nitya Lila, so it's happening, but in some of these pastimes, those who are in this stage, and you can, when it says in Persians, Shanta Ras is also a very, how can you say, neutral situation. And so we can extrapolate that in this case, here in personal means this Shantaras, neutral. What, do you want to be a tree or a blade of grass?
I mean, I guess you still win either way.
We shouldn't really consider the situation to that extent. Everybody wants to be something. I mean, in our neophyte, conceptions, we were always thinking after Prabhupada vocalized that, about the situation. We also wanted to live in Ramanriti eternally and play with Krishna and the cowherd boys. What could be better? All right, to sit with Krishna in the bank of the Jamuna and share prasadam. I mean, what's not to like about this eternal pastime? Especially for those of us who are not so advanced. I'll take that. I'll take anything, but I mean, give me a choice, I'll take that. Any other questions? Srimad Bhagavatam, summary study, 10th canto, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, peace.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada, peace. Sri Radha Govinda, peace. Sri Krishna Balarama, peace. Jai.